Okay.
But to your question of, so last time I installed that a couple weeks ago. Truth be told, it was during the IFS annual conference, the Internal Family Systems annual conference. And, when you sign up for a conference, you look at the agenda and you're like, all right, these are the modules I want to go to. I definitely don't want to miss this workshop. And then sometimes, and then you go to those workshops and then they're not as gripping. So in the virtual, I'm like, so there's two things to confess here. One is, if I were actually out in another state, in a physical space at a conference, I would not be installing a guitar rack, hanger, right? I would not be able to do that versus being in a virtual space, where it's like, well, I can like listen to this in the background. I'll clean my office, right? But if my office, I've already cleaned my office, then it's like, well, what's next? Oh, let me install this, right? Well, that's the first thing. And then the second confession I must make, and this is not the first time it's happened, but where I actually I've imbibed in substances. So I have a vape pen right behind my iMac here, and post hoc, I'd like to think that, is there a part of me that's like, well, let's do just a little dose of that and see what parts of Robin it triggers. Will it trigger shame? Will it, the one that's doing it, my guess is a high schooler, a young teenage part that's like, we can get away with this, or what?
Okay, let's do it.
Right. But that's in some respects reckless, in other respects maybe creative, but so that's the point, is like, if I was in Denver in a conference room, I wouldn't be doing those things. But that's one of the virtual spaces that you don't even go on camera. It's just the only live interaction you put is someone enter something into the Zoom chat. Actually, there was this facilitator that had some kind of newfangled, like those, like, not a word cloud, but like people could enter something on a different website and then it would show up, and then all the participants could see. So people get creative. But anyway, I digress. You asked if I play. I do, not enough. I started playing guitar when I probably like picked up my mom's acoustic guitar and picked out the Princess Bride, like the music from the Princess Bride movie.
Oh, how great. What a great first tune to play.
Well, there's that. There's like the A-Team theme song.
A-Team.
And then, Come As You Are, as easy Nirvana riffs or whatever. But that's actually ended up, that's how my wife and I met each other. Was the band was on tour and my wife went to school in Philadelphia. I don't know if I told you that story, but
no.
So even if I were to retire from the instrument altogether, the relationship, which I won't do, but the relationship with that, endeavor got me to find my life mate in this lifetime.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's
yeah,
so cool.
yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So when you say the band was on tour, I'm assuming you're not talking about the A-Team.
Not the A-Team. No.
Mr. T was on tour.
Yeah, no. So that was our first stop, was in Philly. My wife was going to school at Arcadia University, and we played at some bar, Raven Lounge. I don't even know if it's still a bar on South Street.
Your own band.
Yeah. So it's a power trio. I was a guitar player, singer, and Kelly, she was so in study mode that she's like, the only time I can actually like hang out with my friends is if like we're like eating lunch together. And so it was very rare. It was an anomaly that she would have actually gone out. And my drummer's friend's friend brought her out. And she's a musician also. So when we were breaking down our gear, the DJ that's going on after us, we're like getting our gear to the van. She's like, can I help you carry stuff to the van? And she stole my heart. But I thought she was with this guy who came, and I was like, she's already off the market. I was single, and I was like, yeah, she's amazing. And yet I'm respectful. And then I find out on Facebook, of all places, that she's single. And I'm like, well, and she also put her phone number on Facebook. So I was like, all right, I'm going to stalk this gal. So,
that's great. That's so cool. I love it. What a great story.
Yeah.
What a great story. And happily ever after.
Yes, yes, yes. So we should maybe like, I know we're gonna probably get to, we're both mental health professionals,
Sure.
and there's no doubt that we're gonna get to mental health territories, but are there any non-industry, not in our field, on the ground, earthly things that feel important to talk about? Because to me, it's the elections, the obvious, the obvious ones, since we're also
Sure.
in the U.S. But
Yeah.
I know that
Happy to
some
go
people,
there.
they're like, I don't even want to touch that. But I am curious, to whatever degree you're open to it.
I'm
How,
certainly open to it.
yeah,
Yes.
what was this experience? Coming up to the election, and did you stay up, or what was it like for you, Mike?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy to. So are we live now? Are we
Oh yeah,
recording?
oh yeah,
Oh, good.
yeah.
Here we go. So it's interesting. So I like to think of myself. So I've always voted Democrat.
Hmm.
And just for the record, I voted for Harris. Um, and I found myself after the election surprisingly dejected and furious, and absolutely furious. Um, and I feel like I was sort of surprised. And I feel like I was just there was so much that came up for me.
Mm.
And as I process stuff and as I talk to people, I realized, so I'm gay, and I realized that as a gay person living in this world, and a lot of the rhetoric on the right that's anti-LGBTQ
Hmm.
opened up some wounds for me
Yeah.
that I hadn't anticipated, frankly. I was like,
Hmm.
what is this? What are these emotions I'm feeling? Why am I so distraught?
Hmm.
So part of that was my own stuff that I had to work through. And then, of course, there's what's the world coming to? What is this country thinking? How can we possibly vote in this person who is so hateful?
Mm.
Take the policies aside, look at him as a leader of this country and a representative of who we are, and then send him out into the world. Because frankly, I went to Ireland about a month ago or so. So many Europeans, so many people in Ireland, time
Mhm.
after time, said, "What are you doing over there? What's going on?" And it was the first time. It was very. I felt ashamed
Mhm.
of being an American because, and people said from everything from like, it's like watching a soap opera.
Mhm.
We're entertained by what you're doing over there. And then time after time again, when I asked them specifically, what issues are you talking about? Like when you say, what are we doing? Sure, it was the rhetoric, right?
Yeah.
Would it time after time, what it came down to was, what are you doing about all the shootings?
Right.
What are you
Yeah.
doing about all the shootings? Like to them, that is so foreign. People are dying left and right. People are dying. School shootings, mass shootings, the violence in the inner cities. So many people are dying. What are you doing about that?
Mhm.
And it really made me reflect. Yeah, what are we focusing on?
Mhm.
Um, Wanda Sykes has this great quote.
Love
She says,
Wanda.
Wanda Sykes, oh,
Hi.
she's great. Um, she said, let me see if I can get this right. She said, until a transgender person walks into a school and beats a kid to death with To Kill a Mockingbird, we're arguing about the wrong shit. We're arguing about the wrong shit.
Mm.
It's, I feel like we're focused on the wrong shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot to respond to there. One thing is the notion of, I want to ask you, you know, identifying with being a U.S. citizen, being an
Mhm.
American, say, uh, when you said I'm ashamed to be an American, I understand what you mean by that. And when you say like, what is it to be an American? It's, imagine 10,000 balloons above you, and you're like, well, let me pull this one down and tell you this one is one balloon that, yeah, this is part of what the world sees as American, and I don't agree with it, and I didn't vote for it, and I want it to change, but I'm an American and it's not changing, so I'm ashamed of this balloon. However, over here, let me get a different one and say, this is actually something I'm really proud of, that the rest of the world, I'd love for them to get the software update and realize that this is the right way to treat people, So in the multiplicity of being an American, I got curious about what you're proud of to be an American, because obviously, the hate and the role model of the leader, I very much of being human beings, and even organizations, you can say, what's something stinks in that organization, you get, well, it trickles down from the top. Like if the management is stinky and corrupt, it's just going to create this whole culture of stinky stuff that needs to get, versus the government and saying, well, we don't have a queen figurehead. The executive branch, the president is the leader. It's the top human in the government, the representative for what it means. And so if the character of that person is filled with hate, then I totally understand that. But I was curious, just what comes to mind in terms of American pride, and seeing and holding both. Yeah.
That's a great question. And that's, as a result of this election, and I've done this in the past, is asking myself that question. So I'm reading Democracy in America, de Tocqueville's, right? Just to kind of get a historical understanding of what being an American used to mean historically. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's a great question and a work in progress. So I really like, I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Siegel's work, interpersonal neurobiology.
Yep.
One thing he talks about is different, and neurobiologically, neurochemically, differentiation and linkage. Differentiation and linkage leads to integration. Integration leads to wholeness, feeling a sense of oneness in oneself, and that kind of emanates into the culture. Mm-hmm. So I feel like America has such a beautiful opportunity, and we feel like we've done it in the past, and there are pockets that can do this, where people feel like they can just be themselves and it's okay. And if I disagree with you, that is okay. You are still accepted in this community. Mm-hmm. Where there's that differentiation, where you are yourself. We're not all the same. No, that diversity is a strength. That diversity, you look at nature, ecologically, more diversity makes the environment literally stronger. Mm-hmm. That's how ecosystems work. Diversity makes us stronger, whether that's bees and flowers and trees, or humans and blacks and whites and gays and Muslims and Jews. Mm-hmm. That diversity can really make us stronger. And I feel like we get there, and then we step back a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I feel like, and it sounds cliche, right? That diversity, where you and I can have this conversation freely.
Yeah.
Without fear of repercussions. Right?
Yeah.
That's something we take for granted.
Yeah, for sure. The freedom of speech and the melting pot. I'm very proud of those elements of being an American. But something you said about being free to be who you are. Well, that's also I can challenge that one, right? In terms of right, to say and that's the thing is, you go, there's certain contexts and communities where you're no, I'm definitely not free to be who I am here. I have to hide that, or just even just down to the locus of the family, right? My family, I hear the way my family talks about X, Y, or Z, and I identify with X, Y, or Z. So, but I don't feel safe I'll get judged by my mom or dad if I tell them that I'm this or that,
right.
But I mean, I'm sort of devil's advocating all of the nuance, and from this perspective it looks this way, but just to kind of pull back to the process of the election, I in 2016 I stayed up until 3:30 in the morning or whatever. I remember it was such a novel experience, this, no one had ever done that before. The businessman, someone who's never had any political experience, never governed, right, is now head honcho of our government. And that really, I had such an awakening about the bubble that I had been in. I was like, Clinton's gonna Clinton's going to walk away with this. There's like no way that Clinton's going to lose.
Yeah, right.
So then when, I mean, she did win the popular vote, but that said, like that was such a shock. And I remember making such a promise to myself. Oh, I need to get out of the bubble I'm in, not leave it, but like travel to other bubbles, like visit bubbles.
Yeah.
So I was sort of like wanted to protect future Robin, to be like, so that that kind of like shock doesn't happen again. So when last Tuesday, Kelly and I went to bed at like 10 o'clock at night. Like we're nerdy around politics. So it's just fun election night is like a fun, who's going to win this and these issues. And even in other states where you're just interested in being a part of the American family.
Yeah,
and what is our country doing, and how does it get realized? You look at also like political maps from the 80s or the 70s, and it's all dynamic and it shifts and changes. But I was like, I'm not going to stay up this time. Like, and I had no trust in the polls whatsoever, which, people will say, foreign actors, the Chinese government, the Russian government, like they don't want the American citizens to trust the institutions, but I was just like, no, the polls got it. I mean, like I'll trust the polls when they earn my trust back, but they haven't earned my trust. And so I was like, everyone's saying it's neck and neck. And my intuition was like, it's going to be a landslide. I don't know if it's good. I voted for Harris too. I don't know if it's going to be a landslide and it breaks for Harris, or if it's a landslide and it breaks for Trump. I didn't know, but I did not trust that it was going to be. So everyone's talking about, it could wait until Saturday. I had forgotten in 2020 that we didn't get a result until Saturday. Right. Because I remember like driving out of here and like they finally called it, and we were on our way to something, and people are riding their bikes, like adult cyclists which happens on the weekend. And we were just like rolling down our window being like, they probably don't know this. We like shouted out like at a red light. We were like, Biden won. And the cyclists were like, yay, because we live in Montgomery County here. That's a good thing in Montgomery County, Maryland. But anyway, so when I woke up the next morning, immediately look at my phone being like, okay, Trump won. All right. Like I wasn't as shocked. I wasn't as shocked. And in terms of just being a member of a vulnerable community, I don't feel like I am. So I'm like, well, if I just stay in this little Robin ecosystem, that's okay. It's okay. That's okay. Right. Versus, and my buddies will tell me, well, Robin, you're not thinking about like, how is this going to affect your daughter's future? And I'm like, that's true. I'm not tapped into that, I'm just like, all right, well, this is an interesting result. Let's see what happens. Because on one side of the political spectrum, you keep maybe tell me if you hear this or not. You hear people saying like, well, there's no guardrails now. Like a second Trump term is not going to be the same beast. This is going to be a whole other Frankenstein's monster that, because, now he's got experience, and now the babysitters are not going to, right. Like all of that. But the other perspective is like, whenever you think about, like, if you're in politics, it's like teams. It's like, if your team wins, well, that's not the perspective you have. If your team wins, the perspective you have is like, oh, it's not now my candidate will be unleashed. And it's like, now they've got more experience. That's a good thing. And they're not going to have people, they're not going to worry about what they do, because they don't have to worry about getting elected again. So they'll be able to be more decisive and effective and blah, blah. So the spin on it is like, that's a good thing. But if it's your candidate that lost, then it's like, this is a terrible thing, And also not just that generally, but again, 2024, of all the generations, my age group, your age group, people older than us, and the Gen X, boomers, like most people are saying, yeah, but this thing's different. There's a reason why. This is the climate, there's something that feels more. I don't know. Is that a byproduct of our tech and social media. And I mean, again, I've been rambling, Mike. What a penny for your thoughts.
No. I love hearing your perspective. And I'm still trying to process and figure it out all myself too. And talk to a bunch of people about it. And I love hearing different perspectives. And just to back up, so my process was, my intention was to go to bed and go to sleep and then wake up, hear the results. I didn't expect to hear the results because of 2020. I didn't expect to hear them until days after. And they were saying that because of all the mail-in ballots, it's going to take ways, right? So
Right.
I didn't do it. I was up at 1, went back to sleep a little bit. I was up back at 3. I mean, it was a rough night. Don't do that, listeners. Bad idea. And I did it. So I think, so as I process everything, what, and from what you're saying, I think what surprised me most is, because I do try to understand both sides, and I do try to see the perspective of both sides. I think that's really important. Without a critical lens, without a deeply emotional lens, try to really understand that person and where they come from. Because I do not believe that anybody who disagrees with me is evil.
Yeah.
And there are just plain too many people on TV who start with that premise.
Demonizing.
So I really stopped watching a lot of the the culprits I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
The media on the right, the media on the left. I just really stopped watching them because I realized that I don't believe in their premise. So I'm not gonna. I just don't want to do that. Then, if you do that, then it's hard to know where to turn. One, so I started listening to snippets of both sides. I realized that journalists in 2024, even before, they're really. I think we need to reword or recategorize, rethink journalism, because now it's so much opinion. There's so much opinion. It's not reporting. And what they really are, I think, what I've come to term, I think this is what I feel now, is they're filters. They are filters with opinions. So they filter the news into what they want based on their own biases, and then they spin it with their opinion, and that's like a tornado.
Well, but also the incentives, right? Like if you want a job, it's like if you want to work here, like we need to make enough money so that we can employ your position and your role. How do we make money? We make money based on our audience and viewers and engagement. And how do we keep our audience and viewers and engagement? Is it the facts or the opinions, editorials?
Right. You're
So
right.
there's a financial, I mean, I wasn't alive during Walter Cronkite, but it's like the change in the media landscape of cable news, social media, writing, journalists, like it's understandable that journalists have an incentive to take a story and then sensationalize it or get the right headline, because what's going to select for engagement, select for clicks.
Yes.
It's so we can't be what's the word, naive about that influencing the landscape.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like that's it's almost like a cultural virus, right? That we're all infected with this, because you're right. It becomes a self-perpetuating system that just increases our division.
Yeah.
Right. That we have such a hard time. I have relatives who are Republican, and they've said some things that I disagree with. I'll just say that. And then it's hard to engage with those relatives. Right.
Yeah.
So I get it. Right. And that divide becomes so deep. Then the deeper it gets, the more you dig. Right. And the more you dig, then you're in the trenches, and it's so hard to build bridges.
Well, and what's okay, so this could be a speaking of bridges, this could be a bridge into the mental health territory of our conversation. It doesn't have to be, though. But I can't help but think about the how the inner systems are, like they're mirrored I don't know the word for it, but what happens internally is expressed externally. So what I mean by that is when I have a part of me that wants to dose me with THC, and then a part of me that feels ashamed of doing that like that's bad and that's the wrong thing to keep doing, Rob, and it's 1 PM. Like, come on, you're a father. Why are you got like a drug problem? What's going on with you? Versus, so I have this polarization internally about dosing and substance use. Okay. What we know is the case if we just run the experiment of a sample size of 1, just N of 1, just me, we learn that these parts of me that are polarized, the critical one and the one that's doing the drugs, right? They're polarized because of what a kind of a virus that they have inside of them. I'll say a burden, to use IFS terms, right? They are burdened, and systems tend to are inclined to go towards homeostasis, right? The ecology in the outside in nature. So this is true with subpersonalities in the psyche. And what turns out to be the case is that what depolarizes them are the qualities of respect, humility, open-minded, open-hearted, curiosity, compassion, patience, not taking sides, not demonizing. So really just saying, like, you're a being that's worthy of love and respect on this side. Yeah. And so too on this side. And what ends up happening is when you bring that kind of like God-like, divine-like, right? Like Buddha, Christ, pick your prophet. Like when you bring that, these polarized parts relax and are able to heal and then unburden and then transform. And so there's the belief that these dynamics, I said an N of 1, but we can safely say with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of run that experiment over and over again, that's what happens. We can safely say there's a actual self inside of everyone that has the capacity to do that. Okay. So long as they don't have severe neurological, they're obviously like self can't embody when you're comatose, say. Okay. Sure, so just generally speaking, a functional adult has the capacity to do that. And so then just generalize that to the outer world and our society. So I'm thinking about you and one of your Republican family members that you're like, one of my family members says something and it just triggers me or just activates me, right? And it's like, but Mike Ryan has the capacity to actually be with the part of Mike Ryan that's triggered and hurt and aggravated and be with that part of you in a way where that part's protected and the true self of who you really are could be there with the challenging family member. And again, I'm not recommending people do this who are being actively abused and to be like, hey, you should love your abuser. That's not your responsibility. Yeah, but what I am saying is to de-escalate polarization is those qualities of patience, open-hearted, open-minded. Like if we don't actually, if we see the person who's doing the thing that's saying like, we need to get rid of these immigrants, Trump, like people cry these liberal tears about separating families. Like these folks don't belong in our country. Things people can say challenging but if you can see past the chest pumping and have compassion for their own anger and their own fear, that's so transformative. And our culture is very, very polarized. And I'm like, okay, what's the mental health professional's role? We're not journalists, but like, what's our role in not only not contributing to continued division and polarization, but actually trying to like help heal what's sick in our culture? What are your thoughts about, again, I said a lot, but what's coming up for you as I say all that?
Oh, I love what you're saying. A lot's coming up for me. So one thing that comes to mind is, like I said, after the election, I had to do some deep soul searching in terms of finding out who in me is triggered, who in me is feeling so angry. I'm not an angry person. Who's angry, who's upset, who's hurt. And it came back to being a kid at 9 and not feeling, and knew I was gay at the time and not feeling okay to accept it.
Yeah.
What's it like to be 9, 10, 11, 12, hiding a deep part of yourself year after year after year? That does something to a person, right? It just becomes a wound, right?
Yeah.
That it's taken some time and work and effort to work through. And being able to identify that within myself. And I have processes that I use to heal myself, to work with myself, to be able to work through those wounds. So those wounds, I heal those wounds. And I always say, you heal the wounds, the gift is returned.
Yes.
These parts are not meant to be wounds. Typically are separated from our true self. They're I use this a parts model. There's some similarities to IFS, I believe. I'm not sure. I don't know IFS. I'm not IFS trained. But the way I use it is, you ask yourself, who in me feels wounded by this, whatever. And there are lots of different questions you can ask. And then there's lots of different steps involved. You turn off what's called your analyzer, so you kind of open up your right brain. And then it's really body-based and it's really open. And you find all kinds of stuff there. People find memories and childhood parts and emotions. Some people see weather patterns and symbols and past lives and all kinds of wild stuff. You're just opening your energy body to whatever is there because you feel it. You feel it. So you turn off the analyzer and allow what is there to be present. And then when you allow that, because 99.9, I haven't found one that has not followed this kind of credo.
Yeah.
That when that aspect of yourself is allowed to speak, to feel, to tell you what he, she needed at the time that was not able to get, in an emotional way, in an authentic way. And you, as your, I call authentic self, listen to this part. People just feel the energy in their body literally shift. One client I was doing this with last week, it's like, oh, this feels weird. I said, does it feel good? He said, yeah, I think so. All change is weird. It's got to be. It's in the definition, right? That things are shifting, and it's okay, because you're not used to, you've been feeling this other way for X number of years. You're not used to it. This energy is returning to you. It's beautiful. The wound doesn't come back to you, right? You wound yourself on the body, right? You get a scrape on your skin. The wound is gone. It's replaced by skin, by you.
Skin. Yep.
So the wound doesn't return to you. The gifts return. And that's when the way I call it, the authentic self is strengthened, because then that part that was aspect that was separate now becomes part of the whole. And that's the integration process. And sometimes there are different steps involved there. And when you can act from a truly holy integrative space internally, it makes, because if you're not, then it's a projection.
Yep.
Right, you're projecting. I mean, by its very definition, you're projecting your own stuff onto somebody else. You just are, right?
Let's use a concrete example of that real quick. Is the politician or pastor or whatever their role is, who is conspicuously hateful of gays, right? The guy, Ted Haggard was his name, I think.
Yeah,
right. Like, right.
Yeah.
So it's like just for the lay audience, like the projection is the person who is really wants you to know that they hate gay people or sinners and go to hell and blah blah. You know, what happens is, it's like, well, perhaps that person has exiled, disavowed the part of them that is attracted to the same sex, and they're hateful of that piece of themselves. And
Yes.
therefore, if that's how they're relating inwardly toward themselves, the part of them that's hateful towards the part of the part of them that's attracted to the same sex just mirrors that on the outside world, and is then just going to hate whoever represents that inside of themselves. That's the projection that you're talking about.
Yeah,
An
exactly.
example of it. Yeah.
A great example. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you're able to heal that wound inside yourself, right?
Yep. Yep.
Then it's easier, still a challenge, to work with people and talk with people who have different mindsets. Because when that trigger it could be gone. Often it is. When you do heal these wounds, that trigger, that the other person's trigger inside you, can often be healed. And if it's not healed, it's often the intensity is lowered. Then you just respond to them so differently, right? You see them differently. You see yourself differently. A relative on social media posted something about, and she posted anti-gay stuff. She posted something about, we shouldn't have Gay Pride Month because we need to have Veterans Month first. We need to have Veterans Month first. Shouldn't have Gay Pride Month until we have Veterans Month first. Knowing her rhetoric in the past, it immediately triggered me, and I didn't respond for a few days. And then I responded and simply said, why can't we have both? Why can't we have both? I'm a gay person. I'm not against veterans by any means. Right? I'd love to have a Veterans Month. That sounds like a great idea. I'll sign up. I'll petition. I'm all for it. Right? And she blocked me. But the point is that I felt good about myself, right? Because I feel like in order to change things, you can't become what you dislike in the other person. And I see that happen again and again, right? Like, I don't like the other side's rhetoric and hate and vile and vitriol, like all that stuff. I don't like that. So am I going to become a person that does the same thing, but just the other side, and feel righteous because I'm right? That's not the way to go.
Well,
because I'm defeating into that energy.
Right. And I think it's reasonable to see that as a risky pathway that folks can end up going in with the best of intentions without the insight, right? Like, it's like we're all human, and therefore none of us are immune to just having really poor insight on that, where we're like, I know that to be true cognitively, but I end up embodying the very thing that I know is the opposite of helpful or healing. Where it's like I can see it very clearly in the other side, and this is what they're doing wrong, simultaneously, while not recognizing the ways in which I'm doing the same thing but in a different flavor, right?
Yeah, right. Oh, I get that.
Yeah. And
that's a great point.
Well, and so I'm not expecting people to just walk around with superior insight, but just I think the humility and the imagine this. I've heard that, I can't remember who said this, but imagine politicians, left-wingers and right-wingers, not the supporters, but the actual ones who got voted and they're in the Senate or the House of Representatives, and they're fighting with each other. And if you're on this side of the political spectrum, you're looking this way at your rival, and you see them as well as the things that are behind them, but you don't see what's behind you. Because you're focused this way, and vice versa. They see what in other words, like, we can actually, back to the integration component, like, we can actually, maybe the opposite side, quote unquote, has a valuable perspective that were almost impossible for us to have, and vice versa. And if we could only leverage that, we can't leverage it when we're fighting, when we're polarized, and we're just both filled with poison, and we're aiming guns at each other, metaphorically, sometimes literally. But like, I guess, and I asked you earlier, what do you think is the role of someone in the mental health field You know, we have our role with our clients, you know, with one-on-one consulting or group work, but like at the larger societal level, I haven't thought this through that much, but I'm just thinking out loud that, you know, if what we're doing in that same parallel process or isomorphic process of like what's true on the inside can get reflected in the outside, if what we're doing with our clients on the inside is helping them heal themselves and integrating the disavowed parts of themselves, then, well, what would that look like in society? Would that be finding the people in our society that are most pushed away and disavowed and helping them reintegrate, helping them come back in? You know, like you mentioned school shooters earlier in our conversation. I'm like, you know, so many of the stories of shooters are coupled with, you know, the shooter themselves was struggling and suffering. And, you know, I don't know if it was true with like, was it 1999 or the Columbine shooters? I don't know if it was true. There was a story about like these kids were bullied and that's why
I
the
think they
trench
were
coat mafia.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, maybe they were. I don't. You would think that the jury is not still out on that because it happened so long ago. But anyway, I guess the story that I'm believing is that school shooters are tend to be suffering on the inside, you know, and like, okay, if so, what's our role as a mental health provider? How do we, you know, I don't want to be driven by some savior complex that we're just going to save everyone, but like, just what can we do in a little way? Heal ourselves, heal neighborhoods, community. What can we do to de-escalate polarization and help make whatever's sick in our culture a little less sick? And what are your thoughts?
Oh, there's so many. I love the question. So I'll try to answer it maybe more precise. So what is the role of the mental health therapist in a more global, social, national context?
Yeah.
Kinda? Yeah. So there's one, you know who David Byrne is? He was the lead
No.
singer of Talking Heads.
Okay.
Acted like an 80s band, whatever. I don't know if he's a curator or editor. So he has this really good, you can sign up. I get an email once a week. It's Reasons to be Cheerful. It's lovely. It's great. He posts stories about humanitarians and people who are doing great work with, you know, people who are marginalized and climate and all kinds of great stuff. Really positive stories. I really like it. So right before the election, he posted this question to readers, and he said, and this was before the election, even, how do I say, no matter who wins, I will, ... And he asked readers to respond. And since then, he's compiled all the readers' responses and made kind of a poem out of it. It's really beautiful.
That's cool.
And one thing I've been asking people is, well, one, people feel powerless. A lot of people feel powerless, that there's nothing they can do. So I ask them that question. So, you know, if you're of a certain political persuasion, even though Trump won, I will ... Just to have people start to think, even if it's small, even if it's say hi to a stranger on the street. Some people want to be involved more politically. Some people want to be more educated and read a book. Just to have an action plan, something that they feel can give them some agency, that they can do something to make this world the place they want to live in. Right. So that's kind of the individual level. And then I think, and Robin, the work you do, and especially with couples too, right? The work we do with people healing themselves, I feel like heals the collective, right? You just respond in a different way. There's so much to be said. You know, I mentioned I was in Ireland. Yes, I've been reading a lot about Irish history and the Celts and, you know, all kinds of stuff. And it's fascinating the way I'll call them the ancient Irish, the kings in ancient Ireland. You know what their role was? Their role was One, and they were all men, which I get is not ideal. So the kings, they married somebody who was of divine, they married a divine feminine who was a spiritual being and a female. So there was a merging of male and female.
Mhm.
They were connected to what they call the other world, the spirit world, the spirit realm. And their main job was prosperity, how to make sure that they were able to work with and the divine was connected to the land, how to make sure that their people were taken care of. There was no ruling over people, there was no managing people. The supreme leader, that job was to help the land prosper. And I think that's such an interesting and different way to think about society, culture. How do we cultivate this nation, this land? How do we help connect with other people?
Mhm.
And to me, that's a mind shift.
Mhm.
Right? It's a little different way of looking at things.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that come to mind when comparing that ancient culture to ours. One would be the diversity of the United States in 2024
Mm.
versus Ireland. The you know,
Sure. Yeah.
well, when I think about a people that is like real, I mean, I think racist is the right descriptor. Again, not the whole person, but
Sure.
a part of the person, and therefore it really seems to be pervasive throughout the entire society, is Japan. So
Mm.
Ireland's an island, right?
Mhm.
Japan's an
Yeah.
island. Now, different scales, different size of geography and numbers of population, but I'm assuming ancient Ireland looked more or less, people had the same skin color and culture. I mean, you might have different
Sure.
like
Yeah,
tribes,
sure.
right? But like,
Sure. And I'd say that the majority of back then, the majority of places looked like that, right?
yeah, yeah. So I get your point, and I'm like, how does that get implemented in? How does the
Yeah,
spirit
right.
of that, right, get it?
Right.
Because that's interesting that it's state. You know, when you talk about the king and then the queen, like the king is the representative of the state, but the queen is categorically this spiritual,
Yeah,
leader.
right.
And so it's
And
the blending
connected
of,
to the land. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
so the blending of like government and religion, say, which are which our society, the establishment clause is quick to say these two things cannot be,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
intermingled.
for sure.
But yeah, I also took your point about, well, our at least this is what I was interpreting from what you were saying, is our role. One of the ways that we help the culture is just this, small changes, often like one, win hearts and minds one at a time, help people heal one at a time. And that helps nudge the needle of prosperity and wellness a little bit more towards the right direction. My intuitions are like, that's not enough.
Yeah, right.
That's not enough.
Right.
And maybe culturally we'll be able, when I say we, I guess I'm talking about people in the community that are actively helping burdened nervous systems become more well.
Mhm.
What role do psychedelics play? Right? Like in the 60s, there was the culture freak out, right? And then immediately, like, it's so cool to think about like the music and even like how cars were designed. Like there's certain things that were like, whoa, look at the culture, look what happened. And
Yeah.
then it got, Pandora's box got closed.
Yeah.
And then we lost all the decades of research, but there's a renaissance seems to be happening, although much of it's still underground. I know that there are psychedelic assisted psychotherapists that are, because of the current drug policy in our country, I believe, I don't know about MDMA, but I believe psilocybin, and I can actually, let me look this up real quick. Schedule 1 psilocybin. I don't even know how to spell psilocybin. Let me see.
PSIL.
High abuse. So high abuse potential. So a Schedule 1 is a high abuse potential with no accepted medical use.
Oh,
and so examples of those right now are cannabis, heroin, mescaline, LSD, MDMA. Okay, so yeah, so the point is, like, so I bring this up with the drug policy, is that MDMA actually has medical benefits. Peyote, I mean, mescaline is peyote. The indigenous cultures that use peyote, how do you think they would react if you said, well, there's nothing healing about this, there's nothing medical about this? Like, it's completely absurd.
Oh, it's absurd.
And so maybe I invoke the conversation towards psychedelics to say, like, well, maybe the one-on-one, you know, in our whatever modality, CBT, whatever you're doing, it's not going to keep up pace with what the culture needs, you know. Because one thing we certainly know is that trauma begets trauma. It gets passed down intergenerationally. Like, the stuff spreads down the descendant line as well as outwardly. Like, when a school shooting happens, like, your child doesn't have to be the one that had a bullet hit them for them to be burdened by the fear of what just happened. So that this stuff spreads. And so I'm wondering, you know, to what degree the mental health field can help, you know, I don't know, activist mental health therapists that can kind of move the government towards decriminalizing and changing the drug policy on some of these medicines. Because I know people who are underground doing this stuff. There's like someone's like, hey, Robin, I'm looking for someone who can help me do, you know, psychedelics to help heal my trauma. You know, I've done a lot of work on myself, but I'm reaching limits to what I can do, and I think that the drugs could really help. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to give you someone's name in Baltimore or in or in, you know, Durham, North Carolina, or like, it's like, these people don't have public facing listings for this stuff because it has to be underground because of the current drug policy.
Right.
But I'm hopeful that that can shift and we can find more health and wellness through the integration of these medicines, these plant medicines.
Yes. Oh, I so deeply agree with you. So psychedelics are fascinating, and I do psychedelic integration work with people. I believe deeply in psychedelics. They've been deeply helpful for me. They work. And or do we have to be careful? Yes. And there are, you know, there's some risks associated, right? Like, and there's some people who probably would need more grounding work, people who would need more kind of restorative work before going into a psychedelic experience, because a psychedelic experience can be really, really powerful and deeply, deeply meaningful. So we do need proper training and all of that stuff, and it needs to be legalized. I mean, come on. There's enough anecdotal evidence, there's enough scientific evidence that these substances have been around for thousands of years. That would be, I like what you're saying. That would be, if what I'm hearing you say is correct, that would be a step in the right direction. If we can legalize these plant medicines, how that can change the culture, right?
Yeah.
Rather than these one-on-one, step-by-step, it could change. It could make a big change.
Well, and maybe, like, also just imagine the difference between someone who's spending months and years doing talk therapy, whether it's group or one-on-one, versus the sort of outcomes that come with psychedelic journees that transform. It's like, you can heal the nervous system through 7 years of talk therapy. You can do it. Like that. I'm not knocking that.
Yeah, right.
And you could also heal the nervous system in far less time.
Yes.
Through these plants, these substances. So then if you just scale that, it's like, okay, well, if we have something more powerful, again, to your point about, this needs to be done responsibly and not everyone is a candidate at first necessarily. Like there are some people whose grip on reality is already very thin, that your intuitions would be right to be like, why would we just completely snip that thread and then they cross the threshold into the spirit world? Are we going to get them back? Like,
Right. Right.
I don't know on that, but just the nature of kind of the bang for your buck and I'm not saying go fast and break things like,
No.
I don't remember, was it the Facebook CEO or one of the tech guys was like, go fast and break things, me. But like, that's not the ethos here. You want to be responsible, but I just think, I wonder what it would be like to take police officers or veterans, to take someone in our society that most people, whether you're on team right wingers, team left wing, that everyone can kind of get behind. Like, we want these people in these positions to be healthy, and they have a gun. We want them to be healthy, or these positions are really demanding. These positions, by their nature, are traumatizing. You're going up and, like, let's say a police officer, it's like you're stopping someone and you're knocking on their window or whatever, and like, it's a dangerous job. And so how many of these people are carrying so much trauma? So I'm just kind of, again, I'm spitballing here, but it'd be great if we could shift the culture to legalize these drugs and also simultaneously generate larger scale change, even with the one-on-one stuff. And so instead of one-on-one, or in addition to one-on-one, that there's more mental health practitioners who are being competently trained to do group work. Again, just because it's my intuition that we actually can't go faster. Like, the trauma is spreading faster than the healing, just to make it really reduce it down to its essence. And I'm like, but we want the healing to spread faster than the trauma in order to keep up pace and to make things well. Again, am I making any coherent sense?
You're making a whole lot of sense, Robin. I completely agree with you. And I feel like this show, I don't know if that's your intention, but I feel like this show is a good example of that, sending this message to, right?
Well,
a group of people.
Yeah, that's part of it. Absolutely. Yeah, it's part of it. I mean, the audience of this show is considerably smaller than, most podcasts that people are listening to. And my goal for this show is I'm like the tortoise in the Aesop's fable. Just slowly but surely, I'm just digging away here in Burtonsville, Maryland. Just
how long?
Just to see how long, But yes,
how long
part
have
of
you been on the air?
It's since 2020.
That's awesome.
Since October of 2020.
That's so great. That's so great.
So that's part of the ethos, is that I'm very much embody my role as a mental health professional, as well as just all the other identities. I talk openly about drug use, and am I hoping a potential client listens to this episode and is like, I can't work with this guy? Like, no, that's not my hope, right? But like, that doesn't, the broader ethos of this show is to help, may the conversation find the person that it's helpful for, and that's the bullseye for me.
Love it. I love it. And I like I'm a big fan of psychedelics. I recently became a shamanic practitioner, which is weird.
Congratulations. How recently?
Was it April that I got mine? April, May, something like that of this year. And I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, because he feels like he's stuck, and he feels like he just needs a jolt, he was calling it. Mm-hmm. So he talked about things that can jolt you, and shamanic healing is one that has that potential, right? It's not a guarantee always. And psychedelics too, right? Those can be two fast track methods to get unstuck, to move out of this pattern that, because if you keep banging your head against the wall, right, sometimes it's just hard to know how to do anything different because you've been doing it for so long, right? How many times do we hear clients and people say, I keep doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. I did X again. They come back next week. I tried what you said, still did X. I reframed those thoughts. I looked at those cognitive distortions. I still did X,
Yeah.
right? Right. It's, and not to, right, we're therapists, and
Yeah.
not to say that therapy doesn't work or isn't helpful. It's an and. It's, therapy is helpful, and there are these other modalities that could be really deeply helpful for people
Yeah.
that look at it through a different lens.
Yeah.
And we just have to be open to that.
Yeah. And my response to that is, from the IFS lens, the mind is multiple. That's not the result of trauma. That's just the natural state of the mind. And it's actually, it's a good thing. It's an asset, not a liability, and in that multiplicity, the parts of you that are not your true self, who you really are, like, I'm a 40-year-old man. I have parts that are younger than me. My true wise self seems to be 40 years old, embodied in this Robin Smith body right now. Again, this can go very, very deep very quickly when we go to past life stuff, and my soul is not named Robin. My soul is in this mustached man named Robin right now, who happens to be 40. But I have parts that are younger, as I mentioned earlier, the adolescent that's vaping in the middle of a professional conference, right? Like, that's not my true self. That is a part. But of all these different parts, in IFS terms, there's two classes of parts. There's protector parts, and then there's exiled parts. And many modalities of psychotherapy are training the protectors. Like, manager parts are one side of the protector class, and firefighter parts are the other side of the protector class. So in my example of the guy who's hitting the vape pen in the middle of a conference, that's a firefighter. That guy's like, this workshop isn't everything I wanted it to be. Let's just numb out that disappointment or whatever, right? So that's what the firefighter part's doing. The manager's wagging his finger and saying, that's not the right thing to do. You call yourself a professional, get it together, Robin, you piece of shit, right? That's the manager critic guy. And then when he criticizes the firefighter part, then I feel shame, which is that little exiled part, the part that carries the worthlessness. That's the feeling that people want to get away from, is feeling worthless. So the exile is not a protector. And other modalities are training. Here I got my 100-day chip of being 100 days free of narcotics or alcohol or whatever it is, right? Like, we train the managers how to keep the firefighters from doing their thing. But we're not healing the exile at all. Other modalities are just working with protectors. Don't drink at work, right? Don't verbally abuse your wife, or whatever the thing is, the anger management, whatever the thing is the person's trying to do. But the transformative approach is to actually get to that little wound that's still carried in the nervous system, because you can train those protectors all day long. We know that the wound doesn't heal itself. It doesn't work like a scrape on the elbow. You scrape your elbow on the asphalt, it's gonna heal without your help. You just have to drink water, get sleep, and the body knows how to do everything else. Okay? Okay, but that doesn't work with psychological and emotional wounds. Heart wounds don't heal themselves spontaneously. Not that I know of. What we have to do is be able to negotiate with the protectors to let the true self. I'm pointing to my head. I really should be pointing to my heart. The true self gets access to that little exiled guy and brings him home. In shamanic work, that's the soul retrieval, right? In that language. So I'm just using IFS language to describe the same phenomenon of integration. It's like the Marines saying "no man left behind." It's like self goes back into 1987, retrieves that little exile, and brings him home and helps him unload all of those beliefs and emotions that he felt, the terror from his dad's anger or whatever, right? I'm using specifics just to talk about my own experience. So once that exile's healed, guess what happens? The protectors that are doing their dance, they don't have to do that anymore, because there's no more they're both protecting the same exile. Very oftentimes, they don't even realize that. They're polarized, like the Democrats and the Republicans. They're polarized. But when self can go, so once self heals the little exile, then they get to let go of their jobs, and they say, you know, we don't have to do that anymore because there's an adult driving the car. Robin's got this. So what would I rather do if I didn't have to dose Robin with alcohol and caffeine and cannabis? What I would rather do is, I don't have the answer to that because I haven't healed that part of myself yet. I still have to consult that protector. But the point is, these parts actually don't want to do this stuff that in other modalities are, you know, get a thought journal, write down your behavior, write down how intense was the sensation or the desire to drink or whatever it is. I mean, it's not the same.
It's not the same. I feel like it's effective in part. It might be effective cognitively. It doesn't access emotion. It doesn't access the body. It doesn't access soul. I don't remember the statistic, but across religions, people believe in soul. Even if people are not religious, they have some, again, the majority of people, I think it's like 70+%, maybe even more, believe in some spiritual nature, some spiritual being, some oneness, some source, some creator. Something is there. Seems to be a human calling to connect with that. And one thing I've learned about the soul through shamanic work is the soul doesn't want to be analyzed. No. You trying to analyze the soul? Get out of here. I don't want to be analyzed. I want to live. I want an experience. I want to sense. I want to feel. I want to be. Analyzing takes you away from that, right? So the reason I love the shamanic work is that it cuts right to the chase.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't like to use the term soul lost because I don't think that soul is ever lost. Soul is connected. John O'Donohue, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's I think he's a mystic. I don't know necessarily what he calls himself. He's a poet. He was a Catholic scholar, very spiritual guy. He's written N.M. Kara, which is Soul Friend, Eternal Echoes, which is what I'm doing now. But he talks about his presence, having a felt sense of who you are, just being present. What he says is the opposite of presence is not absence. The opposite of presence is actually vacancy. Vacancy. Nobody's home. And that is, I haven't found that to happen ever with a person. That doesn't happen. What you feel, what you experience, a symptom you feel is absence. And in absence is the presence of longing.
Mm-hmm.
In this absence, the feeling you have, when you get deep down into it, there's a presence that you know something is there that is missing. And that is the part that people, myself included, often have a hard time being aware of. Because it feels just like, right, this missing piece. You can reframe it and see that it also means there's a longing. So with this soul kind of absence, you restore that soul, and people feel that soul embodied in them in the shamanic healing. And the other part about it is that that's sometimes for human beings, when it's a soul absence, it's very hard to retrieve that soul on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Not impossible, just very hard.
Not a lot of people can do it.
Not a lot of it. And
right.
Sometimes that soul absence has been filled with other energies.
100%.
That need to be removed. And it's a simultaneous thing that is really, really hard to do by yourself.
And I very much appreciate what you're saying. And I also want to posit that in my view, and I'm very open to being wrong about this, in my view, I haven't yet found an example in which it's not full of other energies.
I agree. Nature abhors a vacuum. Something always will fill it. Yes.
Yeah. That, and the reason why I say that is because in IFS terms, these little exiles, so I could maybe call them fragments of a soul. And again, I agree with you that they're never really lost, but it's like, well, from whose perspective? Like, they're never really disconnected from self. They're never really disconnected from God, creator, from source. That seems to be true.
Yes.
But from other parts of ourselves, they're
Yes.
absolutely in a hidden cave or something. Like they don't have access. So
Right.
so we could use the word lost from that perspective and be like, well, that makes sense. But yeah, there is this hope that actually, like, there's never a disconnect. It's just there's blockage and there's lack of access, you know.
Right.
So I know that might seem paradoxical, but I these other energies in IFS, when a part of a person gets exiled, it's carrying these burdens, and the burdens are extreme beliefs and emotions. So it could be extreme terror from sexual abuse. It could be, like I said, there could be the belief that I'm worthless. I have no value. Those burdens leave the body in the healing process. And in the IFS tradition, they don't just leave and just float away on their own. They actually need to be taken care of and transformed in an elemental way. So those the little part, I'll just use myself as an example. A little 8-year-old Robin, once he connects back with who I really am, that little 8-year-old no longer has to carry these burdens. He can get the software update. He can realize, oh, it's actually 2024. And so then he can let go of these things. And when he lets go of them out of his spiritual body, it's like, okay, put him into the fire or the water or the wind or the earth or the light. So the burdens have to be transformed by something. They can't just flitter around and float away. And I think this is coming from a kind of a rationalist part of me. I think the reason for that is because if they're not taken care of, they slip back into the spiritual body. And the reason why seems to be that those burdens are sentient beings as well. That a belief, like the belief, like I can't get my life together, or I'm a piece of shit, or like whatever the belief is, that belief is a sentient being with its own sovereignty and apparent free will. And when you do that work with these beings, sometimes they're just very low level, one-dimensional. They just put the burden in the fire takes care of it, we're healed, bring them back to the present, great. Other times they're not these low level beings. They are very intelligent, very sophisticated, very sneaky beings that other traditions call them jinn or demons. They're entities. And they are foreign, and they don't belong to the person. They don't even belong to the person's lineage. However, they might have had their hooks in the client who's alive today, as well as that client's ancestral line. So yeah, when we talk about the spirit world, time and space, the rule it's a different ball game. So the rule
ball game.
Yes. And Mike, you were saying, I think maybe before we hit record, that you had some, I have questions for you, but you also had some questions for me. So I don't know if you about psychedelics and the spirit world, and I'm happy to go first or you go first, but what feels right for you?
Why don't you go? Why don't you go first?
Okay, so
I'm trying to recall our conversation.
All good.
My memory.
Oh well, look, when you sign up to be on this show, you realize that you're going to be pinballed around, because I go all over the place. Okay, so you were talking about the analyzer, and so this is, I find to be the case that an individual cannot access spirit when the analyzer is on board and driving the bus. There's no way there's no chance in hell. Same is true with the skeptic, hyper rationalist parts. They just don't allow access. Logical parts, they don't allow access for spirit. And so people will have spiritual experiences only after they ask those logical, rational, problem solving analyzer parts, thinking parts. Ask them, would they be willing to soften back? Would they take a half step to the right and sit right next to you? You just need separation from their presence. And when that happens, when they agree, when they say yes, now there's an opening for contact with spirit, but not prior
Mhm.
to. And I'm curious, in your training, Mike, how do
Mhm.
you go about getting this problem solver analyzer part, offline so that the person can do that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm trying to think how, because this training I took was, and I used frequently with clients, is like a 12-week training.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to summarize it.
Yeah, of course.
Um, and she's a shamanic teacher, but there are certain aspects of this that are not shamanic. And some people don't align with the shamanic cosmology, and that's absolutely okay. You can still do this work. So the idea is we all have energy bodies. And the first step is to go into your energy body and to just do some grounding to create a container of safety for the work you're about to do.
Mhm.
And the ways to do that, but I won't get into that. So that's the
Yeah.
first step. And then you kind of just go up to your heart. There's words I will say that they repeat to call their authentic self, true soul self, into presence, into their body. It's interesting. Sometimes when people do that in their hearts, they feel some energy shift.
Yeah.
Awesome, you may or may not. Then they climb up to their head. You can ladder, tree, somehow visualize it.
Yes.
And then when it's their first time, I allow them to and guide them to open up to their senses, explore what's in your mind. I make sure I use mind and not brain.
Yeah.
It's a little different. So explore, how does the sense of touch come into your brain and how is that processed? The sense of sight, the sense of, so just open up to your senses, open up to the long-term memory. Where is that? Where's that located? How's that stored? And then they go up to the front part of their brain, and they say it's like a viewing screen of a starship. And there you'll find, and after all this, they're kind of deeply in the process,
Mhm.
and that's where they'll find the analyzer. And I
Mhm.
explain that the analyzer is good, the analyzer is great, the analyzer is important, gets us through the day to day. And for
Absolutely.
this, it's he, she, they, not necessary. We're just going to politely ask to just, however you feel, however you visualize, just turn it off. Promise you'll be back. This is a good thing. You're just giving them a rest. And most people can do that. And then it's interesting to hear people say, "Ooh, I feel different. Feel some
Yeah.
energy shift."
Yeah.
And physiologically, for the science people out there, you're literally analyzers pretty much left hemisphere of the brain, probably.
Yep.
The right hemisphere of the brain is where we're going to journey to,
Mhm.
because the right hemisphere of the brain has more connections to the body and more connections to I should say, more connections to the felt sense
Mhm.
of the body. So anyway, and then what you do, so you're still your authentic self. You go back down to your heart. And then I ask the question that we had decided upon beforehand: who in me is blank? Who in me feels blank? Whoever felt triggered. And then they had pretty much already identified where they feel that in their body.
Mhm.
And then they connect with that part. And that's when it gets really fun and interesting.
Oh yeah.
And because the analyzer's off,
Yep.
and it's just beautiful work, because how that part did not have that beautiful, loving adult presence in their life. And that's why he, she, they needed, that's what they needed. I often, actually, I often don't say this to clients, but I feel like the tension we feel, the tension that is left in their body, is exactly the space where we once needed to be hugged as a
Mhm.
kid. We just needed to be embraced. That's what
Mhm.
we needed. And that part there often just wants that emotional, physical embrace. Just hug me, hold me, tell me I'm okay.
Yeah.
Listen to me. Don't judge me. That might not make sense. I'm 7.
Yeah.
Just let me feel and say these things. Um, and that's when the integration really, really continues.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I love that. So first of all, the notion that there is a grounding practice,
Yeah.
right? And I know you said, like, you could take 20 minutes to describe what that all
Yeah,
entails.
there's a lot. There's lots more. So please
Of
ask
course.
questions.
No. I know you had to give us in the Spaceballs, Mel Brooks, the short version.
Right.
Like, but yeah, when I think about past life regression journeying, the person has to be taken care. When you go into the spirit world, it's not as if it's all safe. So
No,
yeah,
right.
so you
Yeah.
have to take certain steps to make sure that it is safe.
Yes.
And so what you were describing was the grounding the person's true self, like grounding them in their body. In past life regression, it's this visualized light coming in through the head and filling up the whole body. Sometimes it's visualize an egg-shaped ball of light encasing the body, so that there is an element of spiritual armor and protection such that nothing can get in. No foreign invaders can come in and infect and create an infestation. That's all protected. And then you can dissociate. It is like, and again, dissociate is the DSM language, right? It's like, then you can journey, then you can go elsewhere. And you're describing that the person, that they go from their heart center up the channel, up to the mind where that analyzer lives.
Right.
And it's there where they're doing the repositioning, right? Ask it to tell it to turn off, let it know that it can take a rest, which is very respectful, right? It's not saying like, if that analyzer is like freaking out that someone else has taken over the bridge of the spaceship and is like, okay, we'll just like fight with that analyzer and throw him in a closet. It's like, that's not how it goes ever, right? It's a very respectful, like, everyone's on board with that happening, which is why you framed it as let them know that they can rest now, because they're not going to be they can be helpful to this process by not participating. Like,
absolutely.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking about like the kickball team and the one kid that everyone's like, that kid can't play kickball. It's like, you can help us get to the championship by staying on the bench. It's like,
right.
Bless their heart. No, but so it's just the analyzer. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, and just what you're saying. So other parts of this process. So grounding is a whole week, right? Just in the training, and the grounding continues. You continue to work on grounding. She calls it the grounding cord. You actually connect with the earth, the center of the earth, pull earth energy up into your lower chakras. Lower chakra could go all the way up, and then connect with your central channel, lower chakra, all the way up through all the chakras to the seventh chakra, and then out to the divine, out to the golden light. You bring the golden light down, they merge, you connect with the heart, and then you create boundaries too. Those are all, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Those are all important parts.
Yeah. But to your point is that the climbing up like a ladder or a tree in the mind's eye, it's going up to that place where that analyzer hangs out and is active, and most of us are walking around living our lives from that viewpoint out.
Exactly.
And when you were saying that, when the healing process of like that little one that didn't get the loving care that it needed, little ones are vulnerable by their nature.
They're kids.
So, and I love what you're saying about like what they needed was a hug. And what I think about in terms of, instead of good and evil, it's like whole and well and healed, and unwhole and unwell and not yet healed. Or it's like you didn't get an F. We're gonna say not yet passed. You can't go to the next class, right? So what's evil is, well, this is just not yet healed. And so the thing that protects people from that is love. I know I'm boiling this down to a very essential, fundamental essence, but it's like, but the hug that the kid gets is this love. And the love protects against hate and fear and mistrust and doubt. It's like, that's the thing. These parts, just once they feel self, once they feel that, they just relax. They relax. And the same is, by the way, the same is true for foreign entities, external energies, like
Yes.
whether we can call them demons if you want to call them that, since we're in the US and many Christians are,
Yeah.
excuse me, but whatever name you give them, they also have a drop of the divine inside of them, and
Absolutely.
they don't realize it, and
Absolutely.
they can be healed.
Yes.
And what is it that heals them? It's the divine love that they don't trust.
Yeah.
And when they or they won't, or they're not ready, but they flee from it because they think it's poison, because they think it's battery acid. They run away from the love. So either way, they get out of the client's nervous system.
Yes, exactly. When you restore someone's soul, there's no room for external energies to be. They get pushed out. And I agree. When I do the shamanic work, if I feel like I said, I don't think there's been a case where there hasn't been, but when there's external energies that are there, energies that are not a client's, then I see that I have two clients now.
Yeah.
Right. I see the client I'm sitting with. Okay, now there's this other energy that needs to find their rightful place in the universe. Right. And often needs healing themselves. And often I'll do a whole healing on them. Well, the client's just kind of just sitting there and I'm right doing the thing, because I don't want to release this energy out into the world. No, that would be creating harm somewhere else. No, this entity needs to be healed. And in that healing, clients often feel a relief, a release. And sometimes the restoration happens first. Sometimes the release happens first. It depends. Sometimes it's both at the same time, depending on the situation. But it's all compassionate because it is all love.
Yeah.
One shamanic teacher I follow, she calls it, it's the big love. The big love. This love for the universe. This oneness, this connection that is where the soul lives. And I feel like when people get to experience their soul, how many people actually experience their own soul? Not enough. I'll say that. Not enough. And I wish that is accessible to anybody, And I'll just say it's impossible when you're analyzing everything.
Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Yeah, that's right.
Well, and that's too many of us live.
Yeah. And I'll just speak to the, like, why is it impossible? It has to do with, it seems to have to do with just activity, right? Like, okay, here's the imagery. Let's say you're going out to a concert. You bought tickets and you can't wait to see this artist perform. And you're going to meet a friend there at the concert, at this venue. Okay. And you're on the floor and there's a whole crowd. Okay. And your buddy is on the other side of the venue. They're in the same room, but just, you can't see them because there's this huge crowd of people. It's like, you're you. Okay. And the buddy is spirit and the crowd is analyzer. Like, it's spirit is there. One of the, I think it's a Swedenborg quote where it's like, spirit is not some tropical bird out over in another country. She's right here brushing your eyelash with her wingtip. She so wants you to know that she loves you. She's right here. But because it's in the unseen world, well, we don't know she's there.
Right.
So and not only that, but the analyzer is going to be like, you're full of shit. You know, what do you mean she's right there? That doesn't make any sense. Like, what? Right. So, and that's the thing. It's a perfect point in the conversation to just say, again, whenever these are released and published, I never know who ends up listening to them, but for the listener who might think that you and I are just off the deep end here, what the hell are we talking about? I'm curious, Mike, what do you say to the hyper rationalist and to the skeptic and to say, like, I don't know, this works for some people, but not me, because I live in reality, folks. Like, what do you say to that kind of a
right?
Yeah.
So I admit that it's weird. It's weird. it looks different, it's odd. And then why is that? And I'm a proponent of the mental health movement and us being more open about our mental health needs, from Hollywood to politicians to the lay people. And why is anxiety so normal? Why? Just like the people in Ireland saying, what are you doing looking at transgender people? Look at the killing. Look at the people dying, right? So I asked people to take a step back and say, why is depression normal? Why is anxiety normal? Again, talk about it. It's good. And why is that not weird? Because honestly, to me, that's weird, right? That we have so many people who are so anxious and so depressed and so disconnected. Now that I've done this work and gotten, to where I am in life, now I can say, that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird, right? And another question is, so why do you tell me your thoughts about why you keep doing the thing that you don't want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me why. What is your understanding of that?
Yeah.
And people often don't have an answer. Here's another
Well,
one.
or they
Yeah.
or they don't have an answer, and because they don't have an answer, they'll start talking, to describe, there's I'm perfect. I'm a perfect example of this. It's like, sometimes I don't know, but I'm like, oh, I'm too afraid to look like I don't know something, and I'll be humiliated. So so a part of me is like, we're just going to start talking, and we're going to, we're just, but that part of me was in therapy for 5 years and didn't go to any much
Yeah.
healing places at all, because it's like, we're just going to talk.
Right. Right. Yeah, here's another good one, another good question to ask. As a therapist, it's a good question to ask. Define anxiety without mentioning the symptoms. Define depression without mentioning the symptoms. Right? What is the source of these things? And to me, it's often soul. There's some soul absence. The way and sometimes I do this with clients, and often it's very helpful. And it's based on Taoist thinking, actually. Their definition of anxiety is separation from self. There's some disconnect between one's true self and how one is actually acting, or disconnect between one's mind and one's body, or there's some disconnect that the body, mind, spirit senses. And like somebody crossing a bridge or crossing a chasm and doesn't see the bridge, shit, I'm just going to fall. That's terrifying. Right? So I feel like the mental health profession has gone so far. I feel like we just, and to your point about what more we can do, here's something else we can do too, is be open and honest and say that as mental health professionals, the numbers of people who are depressed and anxious continue to rise. Right?
Yeah.
That's not to blame us. I'm not pointing any fingers at all. It's societal, it's cultural, and we also have to look in the mirror and say, am I doing symptom reduction or am I doing deep healing?
Yeah.
Right? We do have to ask ourselves these questions that are hard and important.
And managed care and the medical model, and
Right.
and if we look at the psychiatrist's Bible of diagnostic criteria, then it is about symptom reduction. And it's just I mean, I've rambled about this so many times on the show, but yeah, there's a reason why it keeps coming up.
Yeah, all right. I won't give my spin. Listeners have heard enough. Got it.
No, they haven't. They've heard me ramble. Give me your spin.
Oh,
yeah.
So here's my thing.
Yeah.
So somebody comes into my office, I say, here's your disorder. Right? Every psychiatric term ends with disorder. So they're going to come to my office for the first time, and I'm going to say, you're disordered? How insulting. How is that the beginning of any alliance to help them? And how is that creating a mindset to healing? they feel like something's wrong with them. So I have literally, by giving them a diagnosis, but no, I'm sorry, by giving them a disorder, the professional as power, I've just disempowered them.
Mm.
That's so completely irrational to me.
Well, some people will say, I am so glad to now have a name for this. I'm so grateful to be given this diagnosis, that I have this disorder, because now I can find community with all the other folks who struggle with this disorder. And in that community, we know community is healing.
Yes.
Well, then a part of me is like, what about, like, neo-Nazis as a community? Is that healing? Right? Is that healing? Right? I'm just like,
Right.
just not being alone. We're a social species. It can be very
Sure.
good for us to be connected in a group and in a community. But so you'll just have that perspective of people that are glad to no longer be lost in the woods, and they're like, oh, I have a name for this. But I'm more on that perspective of like, actually, that's kind of cursing the person. You've just given them a diagnosis. It's kind of a curse. It really is. Because now they're like, oh, okay, that's what I am. That's what I carry. Those are my limitations. And that in and of itself can be a barrier to connecting with your unlimited nature,
Yeah, right. Right. And what if and I hear what you're saying, and I've had that with clients too. And I'm all about community and finding people who have similar challenges that you have. And what if we didn't call it a disorder and gave you the community as well, right? So there's he's a neuroscientist I follow. And he studies psychedelics, actually. So what he talks about is, and there's brain science behind this. There are, when we have trauma, when there's emotional experiences that are overwhelming for our system, it changes the system. And the system, what tends to happen, he calls them attractors. There becomes neural networks in the brain that then become one's reality, because you have to cope, you have to deal, all understandable, all very, very human. So the attractor has a certain magnetic gravitational quality toward it. So then that becomes reality. Mm-hmm. And because it has a magnetic quality to it, it's hard to detach from that attractor. Thus, one theory that psychedelics help, because it helps you detach from that attractor, explore the plane of possibility. So what he says, I just love. I feel like this is just so much more compassionate. What he calls it is, because of what happened and because of your system had to recalibrate, your system created a different kind of order, a different kind of order. Still an order that made sense for you based on what happened. And that's okay. Not a disorder, a different kind of order.
Yeah. Well, and I might say, and that makes sense. Because if you say, and that's okay, you might activate all the parts that are rallying for change and saying it's not okay. It's not okay, right? Like, but those parts that are like, it's not okay, even they can be like, do you see how that makes sense? They're like, oh, I see. We put these, once I see the context, it's like, oh, of course, this is the new kind of order because of what we went through.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I do firmly believe that, because I like systems theory. I think we are a system,
absolutely,
an energetic system as a human that lives in a larger system. There's all these beautiful interconnections between them, spirit and soul and all kinds of great stuff, and love. That when I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
You know what? It's okay. I was actually preoccupied because I forgot to, and it may come back, and if it does, that's okay.
Yeah.
I forgot to tell you that we actually have to stop at 2:45 today because I gotta start like baking chicken and go get my girls. They're gonna be performing in the Alexandria Symphony Orchestra's production of Carmina Burana, and their dress rehearsal is across the Potomac River tonight. So,
oh my goodness,
yeah. So,
how fun!
But before we go, I wanted to ask you if there's anything that you've got to plug or announce or point listeners towards, people who are interested in what you're doing. Where can they learn more about you, and what upcoming things do you have?
Oh, thank you so much. So the best way is michaelryantherapy.com. So I do individual therapy, I do shamanic healing, I do psychedelic integration. If people want to just call me and just explore some of these ideas. Hey, they heard me on your show and, just interested and just want to, I do free consultations of people. Often if there's an interest sparked, I'm happy to talk to people because I know, especially the shamanic stuff, I get it. It sounds weird. And if there's a spark of interest, why not explore?
Yeah. Well, I want to tell listeners, I've been in the physical room with Michael Ryan, and I will say this is one of the first compliments I gave you, is that everyone has a different energy, and some people, there's an energy that you bring that is just, it's very loving and it's very safe. And I'm telling you, not everyone has that. So I want to say that on the record here, that, maybe for some people that could be intense, and they're like, oh, but like in the same way, and gosh, this is going to sound terrible, but like in the same way that God can be too intense, you look at that light and it's too bright. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, you have a presence and an eye contact, and it's no surprise to me at all that you're in the field that you're in. And it's always fun to chat with you, Mike. And thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, absolutely. Robin, it's been a joy to get to know you over the years. I love what you're doing. I love talking to you. You make this so easy. You have just such a gift for stimulating conversation and making it comfortable for people. Thank you.